Hi, I'm Ray, and I'm an 18-year-old college student that goes to the University of Oklahoma. I'm a photographer, and I wanted to share 5 things I learned after being a photographer for 3 years. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is the gear you use actually really does matter, and the more you improve your gear locker and what you have, it's going to help a lot. So obviously, when discussing this, there's a lot of controversy, and a lot of the bigger YouTubers talk about how it really doesn't matter, and you can get photographs on an iPhone compared to a really nice camera, and they're going to be about the same, which is crazy to me because what they're comparing is the newest iPhone that's come out that barely anybody has. So how can you compare the newest iPhone to one of the nicest cameras that are out there right now? It doesn't really make sense, and that's when I have a lot of discrepancies, and that's when my opinion comes in. So obviously when you're taking photos and maybe you see a super creative one or a different field of view or something that is completely different, it usually doesn't have to do with the gear. But when you're taking photos of things that really matter on the gear, I feel like there are 2 planes of thought. The first one is the creative side of photography, which matters immensely. If you don't have that, obviously you're not going to succeed. Then the second plane of thought is how high quality things are. My first example of when gear really matters is maybe when you're shooting in low light. That is very difficult to photograph when you're shooting on something that's like this, a kit lens that can only go down to 4.5 aperture. That's not going to help you a whole lot. But maybe when you're using something like this, a 50 nifty that you get at Target or any other store like that, where it can go down to a 1.8, that helps a lot. So even though this is only $125, it's still an upgrade. It's ridiculous. It helps immensely with your photography. Here, let me give you 2 examples. This was taken with a kit lens that I got, and this was taken with a nicer lens that I bought. Now you can see how the grain is very different on both the images. It can definitely show when you're using gear that is slightly cheaper. Another example is, say, hey, you really want to do drone photography. Maybe that's the thing that you really want to do, and you really have enjoyed it. Say you buy a drone that can take photos for maybe $100. Obviously, the photo that you get from that versus a $1,500 Phantom drone is going to be extremely different. That being said, let's go on to number 2. Number 2, the biggest thing that has been kind of annoying to me, but definitely helpful in some ways, is people are going to talk down to you. I've gotten talked down to a lot by photographers that are just as experienced as me or have many years on me. Sometimes they talk in the wrong way that can annoy you very much. I have been very annoyed by many people before, but also I know that what they're saying can be very helpful. Even when somebody has 1 year of experience on you, they can tell you stuff you had no idea about, and it can really open your ears to learn more and maybe be a better photographer. So one example that I like to bring up a lot to a lot of my friends when they may be annoyed by somebody talking to them and being rude about it is when I was taking photos at a basketball game. I was using a 7200 that had image stabilization. You could turn it off or you could turn it on. I had it on obviously because the lighting obviously isn't always the best. I was taking photos. Then the actual basketball photographer that takes photos for the basketball team and other sports teams looks over at me and says to me, "You should probably turn off your image stabilization." I was like, what? And he said it in kind of a rude way that threw me off, and I was kind of just already annoyed at him. But then he explained to me about how it's taking away from the actual photo, and your camera is giving more attention to that than actual snapping the image, and it could help me immensely if I turn off image stabilization. Even though he kind of said it in a rude way, I understood and followed what he was saying, and I just kept going with it, and I took photos, and honestly it did turn out better. Even though it was a small amount, it was helpful. So even though sometimes people will talk down to you and maybe be rude about it, what they're saying could be extremely helpful. And if you are thinking, well, I already knew that, then why aren't you doing it? That kind of thing is something that you need to think about. That is something that I definitely learned, is trying to have an open mind. Definitely when I was first taking photos, I definitely wasn't thinking about that, but now that I've worked through it and learned more from people, I've definitely gotten better. That brings us to number 3. The third thing that I learned definitely is super helpful, that I learned pretty early on, that you should definitely change to, is shooting on manual or raw. So I went ahead and grabbed one of my cheaper cameras, the SL2, and I just want to show you what manual really does for you. So let me turn this on. So when you're shooting on the classic auto, obviously the camera does all the work for you and all you have to do is really take the photos. But what is the issue with that? There are a lot of issues with this. First of all, you have no control over your camera. Say it's going to be way too yellow for you or way too white for you because the white balance is being controlled by your camera. Do you want that? No. So you're trying to shoot sports and all your photos are coming out blurry. That's because you're shooting on auto and you haven't increased your shutter speed. So basically changing to manual, that helps you control your shutter speed, your aperture, and your ISO, and you can change other things for your settings. This is extremely helpful and can improve your image quality a lot. There are so many videos on YouTube explaining ISO, aperture, and your shutter speed and how those change with your kind of lighting and what you're trying to photograph. It is super helpful and can improve your photography immensely. So obviously shooting in JPEG gives you high quality images that you can obviously work with. And when you're editing on maybe iPhone or maybe a tablet, this is super helpful. Shooting JPEG obviously takes up less storage on your computer or on your iPhone. So obviously shooting on that is completely normal, and when you're starting out, I suggest shooting on JPEG, but when you start editing on a computer or maybe even a desktop, you should definitely be shooting on RAW. It gives you so much more information for your photo so that when you maybe are shooting in dark light, you can bring up the exposure and it will be completely fine and not as grainy as when maybe you are shooting on JPEG. Okay, so the fourth thing that I definitely want to say is that you should be definitely taking more photos anytime you can. Say you're going to a party, bring your camera just in case you want to photograph something. Maybe you're going to your siblings' YMCA game or something like that. Take photos of them, learn how to shoot sports. Maybe you're going to a concert. If you have a smaller camera, you can take it in. They don't care. Take photos of the concert. It doesn't matter what you're doing or whatever. You can definitely take photos there. I think that's definitely something that I just naturally did. I was always taking photos because I wanted to take more photos. Definitely always asking my friends, hey, do you want to do a photo shoot here and there? And we were just taking a lot of photos. When I talk to some of my photographer friends, they always say to me, oh my gosh, your portfolio is huge. You have so many photos. Though always my photos may not be the best from when I first started out, they're definitely there because I was taking photos and some of them turned out well. That brings me to number 5. The fifth thing that I learned is finding your style is very hard. I have transitioned through a lot of styles. Maybe the first one is when I was only taking horizontal photos. This one when I was trying to take photos that correspond to the season. And then the one that I'm sticking with right now that I really enjoy and that I like. So they are all very different, as you can tell, and they were all influenced by different things and different photographers that I know and YouTube videos that I watch. But this style that I'm on right now is definitely the style that I have chose for myself that was not influenced by anybody else. It's photos that are colorful and different for every single photo, and every photo shoot is its own thing, and that's what I want to do with my photography. So it's very different than the other ones that I was doing, but that's okay with me because it's my photos and that's what I wanted to do. So finding that style that you like to do is extremely important for your photography, and so that is 5 things that I learned after being a photographer for 3 years. They are all very different, and as you can tell, they have influenced my photography and my ability immensely. If I could ask you to like and subscribe, that would be awesome, and maybe even follow my photography Instagram would be super amazing. I also have another video coming out this week that is basically going to explain how to get internships and jobs as a photographer even when you are just starting. So that's all I really have. Have a great day. Cheers.